Tahim's Wicked Supreme video. I have not much to comment on it, honestly. But now it's going to spur an argument about how Vosh just uses big words to make really bad arguments. And he's a bad teacher. Because if you just use big words and people are just repeating them without understanding them, you're not teaching anybody anything. So, yeah. I don't think the thing is I don't watch a lot of Vosh content, so I don't have a lot of examples to pull out of my brain. But, hello. Oh, did you just kick me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're a little quiet, but I can turn you up.
All right.
Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, no. All right, just fuck my boat, I guess.
Well, I am ready to defend Vosh and I guess Hassan as well for the 10 millionth time at this point.
Yeah, why? Why do you keep doing it?
Hey, us lefties kind of have to have each other's backs, you know?
Nah, fuck that. Somebody says something stupid. Fuck it, you're going under the bus.
Well, I don't necessarily agree that it's stupid in this case.
Okay.
But I'm going to try, and I will avoid using any dumb philosophy words because they are all cringe.
Okay, yeah, it's not the fact that they're dumb. It's the fact if you're using big words and people can't understand what you're saying, that becomes the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that I'll try and explain the positions a little bit.
Okay.
So I want to start with, and like this is the position that I hold the most, that I get incredibly annoyed at, and I don't blame people for holding it because it's kind of like a natural thing to hold, but I want to try and explain why it's a little bit weird. So we'll talk about so we're talking about the Hassan, like if you don't like something, you can't do it, or like or you can explain your contention, I guess.
Yeah, so if you're going to rally against something like, let's say, landowner, or like being a landlord, and you're saying it's really wrong, it's bad, they're leeches, right, it's bad things. If you were to then go become a landlord, it doesn't all of a sudden make it good because you're a good person, right? If you're claiming that action in and of itself is bad, then it would still be bad when you partake in it, even if you are a good person.
Okay. So, well, I can agree with that to some extent, right? If an action is bad, it's still bad whether you're a good person doing a bad action. I absolutely agree with that.
Okay.
But the first part that I want to get to is you don't have a problem with landlords, right?
No, not at all.
So, me as a socialist, or whatever variety of a socialist you want to call me, this is a criticism that we hear a lot where, oh, you hate a system, yet you participate in the system. I know that's not the criticism that you're necessarily making, but the line that I draw is I try and criticize people for doing things that I don't really like. So, for example, I could criticize a landlord being shitty.
Okay.
However, and I'm fine criticizing landlords being shitty, but I'm not going to criticize that landlord along the lines of, oh, you don't think landlords should be shitty. I'm going to criticize them because you're not treating your tenant well, you know?
But you'd have to have that knowledge pre-hand, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in order to condemn an action, it's pretty important to know what you're condemning, right?
So would you condemn the action of being a landlord in general?
I might, this is where lefties and I will disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not inherently against, I guess, the idea of a landlord kind of thing. What I do think needs to happen is we need to have large housing projects to accompany it, so landlords do not have the same powers that they have in our current system, right? The problem that I have with being a landlord is that you're easily able to abuse the power you have over other people. And if people have access to affordable housing, and they have to compete on that level, I don't inherently have a problem with landlording, though that's probably a position I'm okay on moving on. But I just haven't had that conversation with a lefty who feels more strongly yet, you know?
Okay. So if you had a lefty, let's say the last lefty you just talked to, I assume they just rallied against landlords, didn't like them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if that person went out and was like tomorrow was like, I'm renting an extra room to somebody to make like extra money, would you say that that person is doing a morally good thing, morally bad thing, or morally neutral thing?
Well, see, for me personally, I don't think the morality of the action changes on what that person's beliefs are.
Okay.
I believe that if they're fucking over the person that they're renting out to, I think that's a shitty action. But if they're being nice and reasonable and this person needed a place to stay and it's a good action, I am in favor of that, you know?
Okay. Do you think it would be hypocritical of them?
Uh, to some means, it could be hypocritical.
It
The
could be.
problem is that I have no problem, like, I don't inherently value hypocrisy as a moral action, you know? I don't consider that in any capacity
Why?
when I make my decisions. Uh, why should I?
Well,
Has
why
nothing to
why
do
would
with.
you ever listen to that person's take on like landlords if they're just going to go around and do the exact thing they rallied against, right? If you have
Because
somebody that
people
like,
can, yeah,
well, I was going to
because
say if you
people
have,
can still do bad things but still be right about their prescriptions, right? I would assume most murderers probably think killing someone is bad, but in the moment, because most murders happen because in like fits of passion or whatever, I don't know the exact stats, but there are a lot of murderers who are not in favor of murder,
yeah,
and they're
they're
technically
they're still
hypocrites.
hypocrites though, right? If
They're
you have somebody,
hypocrites,
yeah,
but
if you have somebody that's like, I think like murder's wrong, and then in the heat of passion they murder their wife, that the person's a hypocrite, right?
yeah, but they can still be right about not liking murder, and still be doing a bad action, right?
Yeah, but
So I don't
we would
think
call them out, but we would call them out for that hypocrisy, right?
I that wouldn't be my immediate focus, right? I would be mostly mad about the fact that they killed someone.
Sure. Right. Yeah, I would agree with that, but it's still like I'm using an extreme example to show that like
Hmm.
hypocrisy is still something we would call out, right? We could go to the landlord thing. Why then would I ever have a conversation with somebody about landlords that is doing the exact thing that they're rallying against?
Because they can still be correct and still be doing a bad action, right?
They actively went out and engaged in the bad action themselves, right? And then
Hmm.
told other people that what they're doing is wrong. You ever heard the expression like the pot calling the kettle black?
Hmm.
Yeah, like it's that kind of situation. Like they don't have any room to speak on how like being a landlord is bad when they went out and then actively started to engage in that behavior.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think the correctness
How
of a statement is relative to the actions of a person. Something can still be objectively or subjectively true.
Yeah, but why take any of that
You,
person's prescriptions to heart if they're just gonna go back on their own advice, right? Let's say,
so that's an optical argument, and right?
well, no, like, how do you trust somebody?
Hmm.
How do you build trust with somebody?
You're probably consistent.
Okay, how do you build trust with somebody that is inconsistent like that?
Maybe you don't.
Yeah, so
But
why would
trust
I?
isn't inherent, right?
No, but why
I
would
don't
I?
need
But,
trust for someone to be correct.
yeah, but I would never trust that person and what they're saying is correct, right? Because they've already gone back on what they've said. So I would never trust that person. That person to me is like borderline worthless.
Yeah, that's an optical argument.
It's not an
That's not a
optical
moral
thing.
statement.
Absolutely,
No,
it is.
because
Wait.
not. Hmm.
Wait. Do you think lying is morally good or morally bad, or is it like morally neutral depending on the situation?
Morally neutral depending on
Okay.
the situation.
Do you kind of see like sometimes as like a hypocrite as being like untrustworthy or kind of lying in the things that they believe?
It can be, but it
Okay.
doesn't have anything to do with whether an action is bad or not. You know.
True. But if that person is kind of being a hypocrite or lying to the things that they're talking about or the things that we should do as a society when they're going and then choosing to engage in that thing, why would you trust that the prescription they're making for society is correct?
Because if they have facts that back it up, that can be correct regardless of that.
But one of those facts is in not engaging in being a landlord.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, if the prescription that person is saying that society should engage in because it's good, right? And then they don't engage in that action themselves, how have you deemed it correct and that it's good? How do you know they're not just bullshitting you on that position?
Yeah, because I don't I don't care inherently about someone's how they feel about their own opinions.
Okay, I just don't know how you trust anybody then.
Well, it's not
I
about
wouldn't.
trust,
Well, it
right?
is though, because then any other statements you make, I don't believe that it's the best thing for society because you're not even willing to engage in it yourself, right? If I tell you, hey, eating a vegan diet is probably the best thing that we can do for society, and I engage in veganism myself, and then you catch me at like the Big Whopper chowing down on a fucking quarter pounder, right? How are you to trust me that that's the best way forward for society? Where is the trust coming from? Because the trust isn't in what I'm saying or what I'm doing, right? Where's the trust? How do you trust that
That's
prescription?
actually a really good example because I think, I don't know if you would agree with me, but for most people agree that being like going vegan is probably a better thing for the environment, but they just don't want to do it, right? Because there's
Yeah.
personal prescriptions.
And those
So,
people are hypocrites.
well, do you agree with it or disagree with it, I guess?
Disagree or agree with that veganism is the best way to go?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be a very positive way to
It
go.
is a
Not
positive way to go. I eat meat. I'm a hypocrite about that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then if I apply this prescription to you, why should I ever trust you again?
Yeah, I wouldn't. And that's why I want people to think for themselves. Right? But if I'm going to go and say but you can look into other areas of my life, right? That I'll give statements because I'm not saying that you should become a vegan, right? That's the difference. Is somebody is saying you shouldn't be a landlord because being a landlord is bad, and then they go and engage in the activity. What I'm saying is like, hey, being a vegan would probably be better for the environment, but I'm not ready to engage in veganism, right? I'm not going to push that prescription onto the rest of society. Whereas the person rallying against landlords saying it's bad and we ought not to do this is then engaging in that activity themselves. So it's obviously not something we shouldn't ought be doing. It's something that others shouldn't ought be doing, but they can. It's literally a rules for thee, not for me kind of scenario.
Yeah, I probably would agree, and that can play a lot into what I think of someone's personal character, right? But I don't inherently consider someone's like personal character when it comes to whether someone is like correct or not. So like, we talk about Hassan a lot. I don't necessarily hold a lot of water for Hassan's personal character, right?
Okay.
I think it's kind of shitty how much he relies on his like anti-rich rhetoric, but pretty much whenever he gets the opportunity, he'll show off his wealth that he has.
Yeah.
And I don't personally like that, but that has nothing to do with whether that opinion is objectively correct or incorrect, you know?
No, but it calls into question the hypocrisy that they're doing and how much of a big issue it is if they're not even willing to put in the work to start that, right? Because here's my question. If those people that are rallying for that stuff aren't the ones that are going to start the motion of not doing that thing, who is?
I mean that
Because it's not a thing I care about. So why am I gonna go and not engage in that action? I think being a landlord's fine. It's not something I'm not going to engage in, right? It's not something that I'm going to avoid. So if they're
not sure how well that logic can be applied to all things, right?
Well,
like
it doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be a binary thing, right? We can discuss ideas and like look at things as they come, right?
Well, sure, but like if I use an example, like Bernie Sanders talks about how we need socialism, but he is not like personally achieved socialism for the United States.
Yeah, but
Does that mean I shouldn't?
No,
like,
but has he
live in a
okay? But has he done things that work towards building that better, like towards that goal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I would say Hassan has done the same.
How?
By his advocacy. He's the most popular socialist of
but if you're
all time.
But once again, if he's saying that we should be paying workers more and then he doesn't pay workers properly, and then he goes, there should be unions, but he crushes I don't know if he has, but like not paying mod teams or not allowing mod teams to benefit from the work being put in. Do you not see a problem with that when he's not even the one advocating it for it, but isn't even willing to put in the work? Why would other people follow his lead?
Now, I personally think that Hassan, I think the big deal was with his editors, and he used to not pay his editors well.
I don't even know if he pays his mod team. I've heard that he doesn't pay his mod team. I'm pretty sure there's other large streamers that don't either. Socialist ones.
He doesn't. I don't believe that he pays his mod team, but I also know from experience as someone who's like thought about trying to pay my mod team the larger I get, and I've like put personal thought to it, and it's not an easy thing to do.
But
and there's like, well, I'm going to
okay,
explain
yeah,
this
no, go ahead.
situation specifically,
Yeah.
because there's kind of a binary when it comes specifically to paying your mods, and that's why I was going to try and focus on the editor part, because I think everyone agrees you should pay your editor. But when it comes to mods, you can either have a situation where you require of that person that's being a mod to do like have a basic workday and they're paid for their labor, and then you're going to have less mods and you can't accept nearly as many and it becomes a much higher cost, or you let people do what they would naturally do. And I personally have been trying to think about how I would pay my mods, but that comes along with a way to track how much time they spend on my platform and how much work they're actually doing. And a lot of people, when they mod, just want to do it for free, and they do it regardless. Now, you could argue that it's influenced by Hassan's size, and I'd probably agree to you to some extent, but it's a really hard thing to do, so I think sticking to the editor, like, if Hassan didn't pay his editor well, is, like, a more clear thing to stick to.
You don't think with somebody with enough wealth to buy a $2.5 million home doesn't have the resources available to him to come up with a system that allows him to even pay his mods on like a sliding scale based off the work they do?
He probably could, but it would probably limit the amount of like modding power that he has, and it would probably impact it, because then you have to have less mods.
No, you don't.
And you have to track the mods.
You could absolutely track the mods, right? You can see how much you could do it by time spent in chat, right?
What's to stop them? Well, that's not necessarily
that's part of like
someone just like sign on mod and then just close the computer, right? And then they get a full salary. Being a mod is like a pretty hard thing to do. I mean, it's hard to track it in terms of monetary compensation, but it would probably limit the amount of mods that he could have. I recognize that he has a lot of money, but like, how much money do you think he should be paying his mods?
It doesn't even need to be a lot. Do you realize like when you're talking like your workers should get like kickbacks, or they should at least get a little bit of like the fruits of their labor? If they're putting in labor to you so that you can have a chat that is not filled with as much shit as it would be if they weren't there, the fact that you would argue that it's just too hard to give them kickbacks, and you can't even you can't even like dish out like Steam cards, you can't give them like a couple $100 here or there, right? Like that to me is just like excuses that have no merit to me personally. Those just sound like really piss poor excuses for why it's okay that he doesn't like pay his mods.
Well, like, you would agree that he needs a given his size, he probably needs a large amount of mods, right?
Sure.
So how would you the model that I go after is I want to do some form of a revenue share, where a portion of the money that I get from subs will go to my mods.
Duber, is there a bot we can ban in chat? Because I'm almost certain when you ban somebody, it says so-and-so banned so-and-so. You could just literally do that too.
Yeah, but it's hard to
yes. Yeah, but how hard is it to be a mod? Right? Imagine the comments you have to see as a mod. Thank you. Yeah, it literally says Duber banned so-and-so. Imagine how much abuse you have to deal with a mod when you have to read like the absolute garbage fucking messages that people send to Hassan, and you have to moderate those out, right? And make decisions, and you're watching chat fly by, and you're trying to catch up and keep up with like Hassan's chat. You and then you go, well, it's too hard to find out like a system to like even give any kickbacks.
I'm not saying it's too hard, right?
Wait, you quite literally did.
No, I'm saying that it's difficult. I've never said it was too hard, right?
I'm almost verbatim. I would go back, and you said literally it's too hard, right? Like it's hard. You said it's hard to.
Yeah, I said it's hard. I never said it's like too hard. I didn't say he was incapable of doing it, right? The argument that I would make around it is that you could absolutely say that he should, and that we'll get into it. And I think that's a bad action, purely because I do think you should probably pay his mods to some degree. But there's also the avenue, and like you can get into like other avenues of this where a lot of people consider that purely I forget.
Do you find that
purely volunteer work? That's what a lot of people consider it to be.
So when because I have Mike does a lot of work for me on this stream. Mm-hmm. He does like profile pictures and stuff for me. I have offered to pay that man multiple times with money. Yeah. Does it bother you that when it comes up, Hassan hasn't even tried to implement these systems, right? Because you could try to implement a system, have it fail, and be like, guys, I'm trying to get it work. Like, does it bother you at all that there hasn't even been an attempt to put these systems into place at all?
To a certain degree, like I think that's why we can talk about specifically the editors, which I've been trying to move on to.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think, like you would say that equally. This is a more widely accepted thing, but you should pay your editors well, right?
I would, yeah. If they're making you money on your YouTube, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was not happy when he was not paying his mods well, and I'm not his mods, his editors, and I'm glad that he ended up changing on that. I found it a little bit weird when people tried suggesting the co-op thing, but I was happy when he changed that. But it's not because he advocated against, like, he advocated for paying people well and then didn't pay people well. I'm just happy because I think paying people well is a good action to do, and I think that's a morally justified thing that we should all do, you know?
Yeah, I guess my biggest thing is like I don't understand why I would ever follow somebody that's not willing to put in the work themselves. Right? Like it's like a have you done a lot of group projects in the past?
To some degree, yeah.
Okay. Do you ever have like one person that's trying to lead the charge, but they are the like laziest person and they don't actually do any work in the group?
I usually end up being the one leading the charge.
Okay, but you ever had somebody like that in a group? Yeah. Why would you ever?
Sure, there's definitely been people who have not been like contributors to a group effort. Yeah.
So like, why would you ever follow that person or want to do work with that person if they can't even put in the work when they want to lead the charge?
Well, it can depend, right? So if they're doing some work as opposed to no work, like if they're doing absolutely nothing or making it a harder process to do, I would probably not work with that person. But if they're contributing to the effort in any way capacity, it's better to have them than otherwise, right?
But like, let's say this person is coming up with like super elaborate plans that need to be done for the group project, but they don't want to help with that group project at all other than come up with plans and then just kind of sit back and let other people do it. Would you follow that person, or would you follow the person that is actively coming up with plans and being like engaged in the actual project themselves and putting in the hard work? Which one would you rather follow?
If you're giving me the option, I'm going to take the better one at all times, right? But
which is?
If we're the person that's doing the work.
Okay.
It's kind of, well, I wouldn't say that's self-evident, but that doesn't mean that the other person is inherently doing a wrong. If they're impeding the process, which it sounds like this person is doing, because it sounds like they're overcomplicating a simple process when they don't need to, and they're not looking to contribute to that difficult process. It sounds like that they're impeding this process, and they're making it more difficult, right?
Do you mean like kind of advocating for like a socialist revolution when they aren't even willing to take in the basic little bit of work to do that socialist revolution, like the paying your editors properly off the start, like trying to implement systems that better look after your workers and things like that? Like, do you you know, having exorbitant wealth and then doing exorbitant things with it? Like, do you not see that's like I see it as equivalent, but maybe that's just through my eyes.
I wouldn't say that's. I'll let you kind of maybe restate that a little bit, because I'm not sure if I would say that paying your mods well is going to lead to a socialist revolution.
Wait, but if there's steps you're going to take, like paying workers well, having workers' rights, and then you run a business that doesn't have those worker rights, I guess I don't know why you would ever do anything with that. Why you would ever listen to that person when they're giving you policy prescriptions that they're not even going to follow themselves? I guess that part is just I can't wrap my mind around that one.
Well, yeah, what do you mean by like create policy prescriptions they probably wouldn't follow themselves? Like, he advocates, I'm pretty sure Hassan advocates for higher taxes.
Okay, that's great.
He would be most likely he would be required to pay those taxes.
Okay.
So he doesn't, like, when you advocate for a policy prescription, it kind of happens regardless of whether you want to participate in it, right?
Have you do you criticize like Jeff Bezos for his exorbitant wealth at all? I'm curious.
Yeah, I do a lot of the time.
Okay, if Jeff Bezos just came out and said, you know what, I would be willing to pay like higher taxes like Elon Musk has done, is it just kind of wipe away all the sins?
No, but I would say that action on its own is a better action.
Would you follow then Jeff Bezos and be like, yeah, Jeff Bezos is like the socialist daddy. He's ready for like the socialist revolution if he just advocated for all that. Didn't change anything he was really doing. He was just like hardcore advocating for it.
I would prefer him doing that to otherwise. not necessarily know if I'd be following Jeff Bezos anytime, though, because I'm not a huge fan of Jeff Bezos personally. But
Well,
I
right
would
now, right?
prefer him to be more left than he is now.
Okay.
And like,
I guess I don't know how you stand for anything when you won't even put in the work, right? Like I guess I don't know.
I put in the work. Like, what do you mean?
Well, not you, but like people that you like that you I would argue that like you probably look up to, right?
Not really. I don't. I have the only person that I am somewhat like actively looking up to right now is probably Shark.
Okay.
But that's because I really like his content at the moment.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that I'm giving like he wouldn't do anything that wouldn't offend me, and doesn't mean I'm like devout to him. I just haven't seen anything negative from him yet.
Okay. I guess I don't know.
I'm not like
I guess my parents just always taught me that if you're gonna say something, you got to put your money where your mouth is, right? So if you're gonna say something like, "Hey, we should probably help people when they need it," and then like somebody sees, and then I see somebody in distress that I can easily help, and I don't help them, I don't know why anybody would listen to me when I'm making those prescriptions and not following them myself.
So, you kind of made a little bit of a switch there because we started because originally you were talking about whether someone is like correct or not, like for doing something, and now we switched to whether you would follow that person if they were doing something and they were like they were saying one thing but doing another. So I was like defending like Vosh's take that Hassan buying like this large house is like not inherently bad, though I'm not like a huge fan of Hassan, because to a degree land does have to be owned and there's not really an option to it. So I would rather
but
someone who's better to own that land than otherwise. And that doesn't change the fact that Hassan's advocacy for anti-landlord stuff would be correct or incorrect based on him owning a house or whatever.
I guess why would you be okay with somebody rallying against something that's bad and then engaging? I guess I just
because I agree with that person.
Yeah, but it just feels like because you agree with that person, you look the other way on what they're doing.
No, I criticized Hassan. I criticized him earlier for flaunting his wealth. I just don't think that has anything to do with him being personally correct or incorrect, you know?
But how do you know that he's not actually incorrect in his position? What if actually being a landlord is like something that's good in his position is wrong? Or like having a certain degree of like wealth is actually okay and it's actually not something that's wrong?
Well, yeah, and I would follow that up with my own personal logic, and I would argue, well, now I'm not inherently against wealth either. I'm a market socialist. But if, like, I would say that on 99% of the things that Hassan advocates for, I'm generally in favor of. He's a little bit iffy on his foreign policy prescriptions, which is where I don't agree with him a lot, because he seems to be a little bit on the, a little bit tanky-ish sometimes. But regardless of that, on 99% of the things, Hassan is unfortunately the best advocate for my position that exists in the world ever. And me dissuading his actions would only harm me and my movement.
So it's to like your own self end then.
Hmm.
Okay.
Like, for example, I'm sure there are plenty of things that other creators do that you're not really a fan of, right?
Yeah, probably.
But, like, let's say, I don't know enough about Canadian politics. Let's say, one Canadian politician does something that you don't like, but he overwhelmingly has better policy prescriptions than every other candidate running against him, right?
Okay.
Does that hypocrisy or that one level of thing that he did that was really bad outweigh your vote for, or would it cause you not to vote for him?
It can, yeah.
Could you give an example?
Well, it would depend on like if you had somebody that was like, I'm going to come in and do like, let's say when Justin Trudeau was elected the first time, he was like, I'm going to come in and I'm going to legalize weed, right? And I was like, man, that's fucking based, right? It's like, sweet, he's going to legalize weed. Okay, I vote for him. And then let's say he gets in and he doesn't do it. And next election cycle, he's like, you know what? I'm going to legalize weed this time, guys. I swear. Would that change my opinion, my ability to vote for that person, even if I liked all his other policy prescriptions? Yeah, probably, absolutely. People are swayed by this all the time, right? That's where we have people like talking about like, well, this politician didn't do what they were going to say, right? They were being a little hypocritical about that, or they didn't really live up to like promises and things like that, right? Like that is part of advocacy, is putting in the work.
I agree that definitely sways people's votes, but I would say that's mostly an illogical decision. So you're saying that you would support someone that you disagree with more than this person?
It's not.
Because he isn't as a.
It's because I don't trust them to put in the policy prescriptions that they claimed they were going to do, that they advocated for, that they told me were important, that they were going to do. That's my issue.
Well, in this example, you said that they only caved on one issue, right? Are you saying that they would cave on like all of their prescriptions that you agree with?
Yeah. How do I know? How am I able to trust them if they can't follow through with the one, right? How am I supposed to know following down the line that they're going to be able to keep the other policy prescriptions that they're making? Where's the trust coming from now?
I would say by that logic, it would be incredibly hard to vote for any candidate.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Welcome to reality in politics. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I don't take that prescription. I purely take what is the best outcome and what is most likely to lead to my preferred solutions. I don't consider, like, I do consider whether someone's going to follow up on their actions, but to that degree, that only plays into whether they are better or worse than the opposing candidate.
Well, if you're talking about actually like how we go to choose about voting, yeah, of course I'm going to look at other things. But when we're talking about is somebody going to follow through, can I trust that they're going to follow through? I can't do that. Not at all. And it's gonna absolutely start to weigh heavily on my vote, right? Because you're gonna have somebody like that was my biggest problem with Jagmeet Singh was he was promising the fucking world with a lot of the things he wanted to do in Canada, and it just wasn't gonna pass. Right? So while his policy prescriptions, I was like, yeah, these sound based as fuck. I knew it wasn't going to happen. So it was something that like I really had to take into account when voting for in the Canadian election, right? Mm-hmm. Because I know that person is not going to be able to follow through with the exorbitant policy prescriptions that they are trying to apply to like for the Canadian people, right?
Yeah, but I guess that's not how I consider my policies, I suppose.
I just
don't mind me asking.
Yeah, go ahead. Shoot for it.
The thing that I'm curious about is, do you have any problems with what Hassan advocates for specifically?
Probably. Probably like the ACAB shit bothers me a lot. If he rallies against landlords, yeah, that'd probably bother me a lot too. My guess is that we would probably disagree with quite a bit, especially when it comes to like the idea of capitalism and socialism. In the way that like people having wealth and like flaunting wealth and stuff like that. Yeah, probably.
I would say that would be a much more worthwhile conversation than discussing whether Hassan will actually be consistent than
I actually like I hate that stance so much. I feel like when we do advocacy, you need to put your best foot forward. Because you're trying part of advocacy is trying to sway people over to you. If you recognize that it might not be influential to you that people take hypocrisy seriously, but that it's influential to other people, that it does weigh heavily on their judgments on whether to follow people, I think it is 100% a worthwhile conversation to have.
Yeah, I guess it could be a worthwhile conversation to have, but you're impugning him morally for
of
positions
course.
that you don't hold, right?
Well, it doesn't matter because I can't trust him. It doesn't matter if I hold these positions or not. The trust is lost. It just blows my mind how you trust people. I don't know how you would trust anything anybody says. If hypocrisy doesn't bother you.
I don't have to, like, what do you mean trust by that? Like, you're kind of implying that trust is like some magical thing that is like required for someone to be correct or not.
It's not to be correct. It's part of advocacy, right? You can be correct on something and still be a shitty advocate for it. Do you recognize that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I think Hassan is a shitty advocate for socialism. He might be correct in his policies, right? And the ideas that he might hold, but I will never be receptive to them because he's not even willing to put into the work to show me that these ideas have any fucking merit. Why would I tell you that something has merit and something is good if you're not even going to follow it yourself? How the fuck am I supposed to know it's actually good? You're telling me this is the best thing that we can have, and you're not even willing to do it yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's weird to me. And not even sorry. Let me amend. Not even to say that it's the best thing that we could be doing, but we should be doing, right? Because that is the most important aspect, right? Because it's not just enough to say this is a good thing that we could be doing, right? Because we can talk about that. I think this is a good idea. We could be doing this. I don't know. We can allow people to push back. But once you cross that line of we should be doing something, I think you have an obligation to do that thing to show people that it is, in fact, the best thing that we should be doing.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you.
Okay.
The problem that I have with that prescription is I wouldn't call like Hassan like a really bad person for
nobody's
not
calling
doing that.
I'm not calling him a bad person.
Well, no, to be clear, that's what the entire conversation between like Irrelevant and Vosh was, right? They were trying to morally condemn Hassan for hypocrisy.
You can do something that's morally wrong and not be a bad person, right?
Mm-hmm. I'd probably agree with you on there.
Okay. So then when somebody says you're doing something that's morally wrong, right? They're not saying you're a bad person. You're fucking up. You're making a mistake. You could be doing this better. You could move where on the slider you are by changing these actions, right? And then to have people dismiss it, be like, oh, you're just saying he's a bad guy, or oh, you're just saying he's a hypocrite. It shouldn't matter. It absolutely matters. All these things. If you are truly one that wants to play the optics game, the hypocrite is one of the biggest things that stands out to people. Right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That's why I spend a lot of time trying to argue why that's not that's not how people should analyze these situations. So I unfortunately do not get to choose my advocate for my movement, you know? I don't get the option to decide who the biggest advocate for socialism will ever be. Unfortunately, I'm stuck with a dude bro.
Yeah, but you don't have to you don't have to associate yourself with those people. Right, that's the thing.
I would weaken myself by not doing so.
And you know what? Sometimes you have to do that. If you truly believe that there is a better way to do your cause or a better way to do your thing, sometimes you have to take those L's, right? If you want to be, and maybe if you want to be consistent, right? Maybe that's just me. Maybe, you know what? Maybe it's a downfall of myself of being consistent is going to hold me back in life. But I much rather, like, when I look at the mirror at the end of the day, that's just like, it's something that I can feel good about. And it's
not about you being consistent, right? It's about you relating to someone else to be consistent.
Well, no, because like part of my advocacy is if I have somebody that is in my in a circle that I like, this is a face for my movement, and it's not somebody that can is consistent in what I think an advocacy should be, right? I'm just going to drop that person. Mm-hmm. Fuck it. I don't care if it's a detriment to myself. Right? Because that person is not aligning with my values. I'm not going to arbitrarily stick with somebody that goes against what I believe just because it's going to better myself. At least I try not to, right? I might fuck up from now and then. I'm not fucking perfect, but I do my best when I see somebody doing something. I mean, shit, how many people have I banned out of this fucking community already being a small streamer for people that I've had like adamant disagreements with, or I've found out has been harassing other people? I ban those fuckers, right? Is it more advantageous for me to keep them around and argue with them for clicks and shit? Fuck yeah, absolutely. But I don't want that shit in my community. So I have a hardline stance that I do my best to stick to, and I keep those people out of my community, even though it's a detriment to myself.
I don't agree with your full logic there.
Okay.
Because I would bet there is a massive benefit, number one, to your own personal ability to handle being a content creator, and also to the strength of your community, that banning these individuals is not purely because, like, you're not deciding, oh, if I ban this person, they're going to be away from my community. You're thinking, oh, I can't stand this person, and having them around is going to be negative to my participating in content creation. It's not purely, you're not making the calculus of, oh, if I'm banning this person, it will, like, harm my career or my like I said, content creation. You're purely thinking about what is the best action for me to take.
Wait, who the fuck are you to hang on. Who the fuck are you to tell me about what my calculations are when I literally just told you the thing that goes through my head when I think about these?
No, I'm just asking. Like, it's a question.
No, you weren't. No, you weren't. You weren't asking. You were telling. Mm-hmm. You were telling me. You were telling me that I don't believe your calculations are this way, right? There wasn't a question in there.
I would be willing to bet. So I guess I'll ask now, and I'll take back my statement.
Okay.
When you ban someone, is it out of the fear that, oh, I don't want to ban this person because they could be a great member of my community, or is it just because you don't enjoy being around that person?
I ban them because they could be hang on, ask that question one more time.
Yeah. So I would say when you ban someone, it's not because like you think that you don't actively think, oh, I'm harming my community every time I'm doing this.
I'm
I would bet
harming the
that you're probably
size of my
thinking,
community. Like I said, I didn't say I was harming my community. I'm harming the size of my community, right? The potential size of my community. If I like get rid of people that engage in certain actions that others might not have an issue with, but I do, right?
yeah. So I wouldn't say that everyone like, and we would agree that I actually I don't know if we would agree. Not everyone judges community by size, right?
On Twitch, they absolutely do.
Do you judge your own personal community as like not great because you don't have a large community?
To some degree, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I mean,
Everybody does. Any conversation you listen to where shit gets heated, it's always about how many views they have. To think otherwise, yeah, absolutely they do.
I agree that it's a component, but it doesn't like say that my community is bad because it's small. You know?
A lot of people do think that way. Absolutely, they think their community isn't worth being in. Yeah, absolutely. What do you mean? This is actually, there's like tons of articles you can go read on this. That's one of the biggest things about like about streaming that you have to be very cautious about and be very wary of, is that when you don't grow as a streamer, you will take it very personally. You will wonder what is wrong with you or your community. And when you have a smaller community and you struggle to grow, people absolutely 1,000,000% will take that as a condemnation of their community and their size. Yeah, 1,000,000%. And it is absolutely something I think about.
By that lens?
To some degree, absolutely. It might not be the only lens I judge them by, but it is something I think about. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're lying to yourself if you don't think that way.
Maybe we're not like connecting on our exact same logic, but I don't think that I have like a shitty community.
Wait, it might not be that it's a shitty community. It might just that you wonder why people don't want to join you.
Yeah, of course, but
Yeah.
I think that
So, so that's not indicative of
so
shitty.
what I was saying is, I think that might have been a misinterpretation there.
Okay.
So, like, I was trying to say that I don't think any less of my community, whether it's 5 people or whether it's like 500 people. Now, I might think about like less about my own skill to get people in, or there's like other avenues, but I wouldn't think any less of my community.
I see what you're saying now. I still would, because it would make me question why people don't want to join it. It might not make me think lesser of it, but it would make me question what I'm doing wrong to not be able to grow. Absolutely.
Well, that would be a personal decision, not like a condemnation of your community, right?
Sure. And now I realize where your question's coming from, but I don't understand where it came from. Because like that wasn't my point with me banning chatters, right?
Well, like, what I was saying is we kind of got a little bit of a tangent, but where I was kind of trying to come along with that is I don't think like you have to analyze these things by a different lens. So like when you look at a community, I don't judge its worth purely by its size in terms of like moral worth. But like when you're talking about a political movement, you don't necessarily have that benefit. And me condemning, like for example, if let's say the entire left came together and we all were like, no, Hassan is a terrible person for probably, I would say, even if like you thought that what Hassan was doing wasn't great, it's probably like pretty, compared to a lot of the stuff that right-wingers do, I would say that it's probably a lot less harmful.
Yep.
I would say that would be like a pretty weak thing to do, and it would harm your movement immensely.
Do you think there's things
the full on my left condemned Hassan, that would like set us back by a shit ton.
Would it though?
Absolutely.
Okay, I have a question. Do you think the rest of the community is just so garbage that if it wasn't for Hassan, there wouldn't be any good advocacy?
No, not necessarily. I don't think. Well, what do you mean by good advocacy?
If all the rest of the Twitch sphere was like, you know what, Hassan, you were just like a garbage advocate for socialism. We're gonna go with somebody else right now. Do you think the community would survive or crumble in on itself?
I don't know. So maybe I'll clarify a little bit. I wasn't like speaking of purely the Twitch community. I meant like the left as a whole, right? So like if politicians came out and started condemning Hassan and that kind of shit, and like everyone like as a whole started disassociating from him, right? So
Okay.
I would say by doing those actions and like taking those steps, that would at the very least take back the largest advocate for our movement there is on the, I think, on the planet. Bernie Sanders might be a little bit larger, but I legitimately think that I think Hassan has unfortunately, has pushed the dialogue so much farther than it would have been otherwise, that he is like crucial to this space.
Do you think he's pushed it too far past where normal people are?
Define normal people.
Just your everyday normal, you non-online people.
Maybe for some. Like, I'm pretty sure his I'm not a huge fan of his statements on like his big meme where he talks about 9/11. I'm not a huge fan of those statements, and he probably alienated a lot of people that he would have done otherwise. But like, other than that, I would say that we would lose like a massive advocate if we took out Hassan. And I'm not saying that like the left still wouldn't be a good movement, but something to still strive for. But it would, like, I would say, set us back like 10 years.
Just from losing that one advocate?
Unfortunately, probably.
Where would all those community members go then if they were just if Hassan was just to like leave? They'd just give up socialism?
No, now that we've had like Hassan do his thing and he has been strong, they would probably move towards other maybe other socialist streamers. Some would probably go to other React Andy streamers. They would probably disperse, but the thing that I value about Hassan is his ability to pull new people in. And because he has so many eyes on him, that's going to pull more people into him. So we would lose that ability to gain steam.
Okay. I mean, okay. Okay. I don't know where to take it from there, because it's weird that you would say that it would set you back 10 years, but then you'd say that they'd probably all filter to like other lefty communities. So, okay.
Well, I don't know if they would. I would say that some would filter other lefty communities. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of the people in Hassan's community, I don't know the percentage on this, but I would bet that a lot of them aren't there for his political analysis.
Okay. Well, then if they're not there for his political analysis, how could he be the largest political advocate if they're not mostly there for his political advocacy?
Because there can be people who are non-political, but their political leanings bleed into their the way that they think. So just because Hassan is a large, normal socialist, that normalizes socialism to a very large degree, right? It is more normal to be a socialist online than it ever has been before.
Do you think it's just more trendy to be a socialist online?
Not necessarily. Okay. I mean, like, trendy, I would absolutely say it's more trendy, but I would also say it's more normal.
Do you think it's maybe only more normal because it's more trendy?
No.
Okay. What makes it more normal? Why is it more normal now than it was? Just because of the advocacy?
There's a lot of contributing factors. There was obviously the Bernie Sanders campaign. There's a large push as a whole for the left. And Hassan has mainly been able to capture that pretty well and filter out more people and push them more towards those better actions to a large degree.
But he doesn't have to engage in those actions himself.
I would prefer it if he did that. Like, it might be that I'm gonna ask you something that is pretty difficult to do, and I recognize that it's difficult for me. And I guess I'm trying to think about this where you're coming from, right?
Okay.
I'm trying to think about it where, okay, I don't personally have a problem with Hassan owning this house, right?
Okay.
But I think it's a terrible action because it harms. I don't know. I guess it might harm me because he's going against some values, but it's not a value that you would disagree with, right?
No, I have a fucking capitalist. Go make that money. But then again,
I just think of that as weird.
But wait, go get that money? What?
No, I think it's weird that you would have a problem with him.
No, I just literally said to him, go get that money, like get that house. I don't give a fuck.
Oh yeah, but you still think he's wrong for buying the house, right?
Yeah, I think he's wrong because he's a hypocrite. Not for buying the house. It's because he's a hypocrite, because he's not following what he's saying.
Yeah, so I don't think that is inherently bad, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess like it just could be upbringing, right? Like my parents told me if you're going to say something, actually follow through, so that people can trust you. And it's one of those things. Once you lose that trust, it's really hard to gain it back. But then again, I guess it's just like it's. I guess one of the things about having morals and having a moral system that you're going to adhere to is trying your best to follow that moral system. Because if you're not even going to follow that moral system that you're trying to get others to adhere to, why the fuck would you ever advocate for it? You should just advocate for whatever people want to do at that point. You should literally just become like a fucking libertarian at that point, honestly.
I like the shitting on libertarians. J-
But if
I'm having
if you're gonna talk out of both sides of your mouth and do say one thing and do another, how the fuck do you have how do you have a moral system? You don't at that point, right? You
well,
literally
like,
have
are you
no
talking
moral
about
system.
Hassan or are you talking about me, right?
Anybody. If you say you're gonna do something and then you don't do it, and you're like, fuck it, it's not that bad if I didn't do it. I just don't. I guess I just don't know. I don't know how I could ever rely on that person for literally anything, because I can't trust that they're, hey, can you do this for me? Yeah, I'm going to do this for you, and they don't do it. Is that like, does that bother you, or is it just like, fuck it, whatever, they didn't get to it, it's not that big of a deal if somebody tells you they're going to do something, or we ought to go for a walk today, and then you get all dressed up to go for a walk, and they're like, yeah, I'm not going for a walk, go for a walk by yourself. Does that bother you at all?
Do you mind if I run you through a few scenarios where I think people, like, I'm wondering where you would disagree with this, right?
Okay.
So, if someone is doing, like, do you think that a Nazi, if they say they're gonna kill someone, that it is important that they are not a hypocrite and that they actually follow through with that action?
Do you have a less contentious example? Because you're going to use this as like a way of being like, oh my god, CC says
Sure.
Nazis that says they should fucking kill people. Yeah, I
No,
can
I'm
already
not
see.
trying to-
I know how this fucking community works, man.
No, I expect that you would say no, right?
No, I would expect, like, I would still want that person to be like a consistently moral. Like, if that's their fucking system that they want to engage in, fuck it. That is their system that they're advocating for. They should be following through on it. Because let's say that Nazi says they've changed. How the fuck can you trust that? If they're not a morally consistent person, how do you trust them?
At that point, I'm not sure if like trust is my immediate concern.
Let's say you
generally.
But how do you know that person's changed if they weren't consistent in their beliefs before? Let's say a Nazi comes to you and goes, you know what, Sens? I'm a fucking lefty now. I'm a based fucking lefty. I love socialism. Mm-hmm. But you know, when they were a Nazi, they were super inconsistent with everything they were fucking saying. How do you trust that person that they're actually a based socialist now?
Yeah, that would come down to the actions that they do, right?
Let's say they're still not, let's say they follow some actions, but other ones, and they're kind of all over the place. Would you say that they're reformed at that point?
Are they doing like, are the actions...
They're super inconsistent. They'll follow some things they're saying they're doing, others they don't. They're all over the place. How do you trust that person is truly reformed?
There are different levels of inconsistency, if you don't mind me asking. So, like, are they directly contributing harm to the world?
You wouldn't know that because you're only getting, like, the feedback that they might be giving you. Right?
Well, like, in order for me to know this, because in order for me to condemn someone, I have to know if they're doing harm, right? So if the things that they're being inconsistent on are... like they're voting for the wrong candidate, like they're voting Republican or something.
Okay, hopefully I figured out the fucking piece for you. Okay, can you observe somebody's actions at all times?
No.
Okay, how do we string together that somebody is being consistent? Is it when we view them, they're being consistent in the things they say, in the actions that they partake? Like we kind of, I think you would agree that that's how we kind of like see that. What people are doing is kind of in line with our moral compass, right? We can't watch them all the time. We can only piece it from what we see, right?
Typically, yeah.
Okay, so if every time you see, I guess like when we're establishing patterns of behavior, right? People are very deceptive in the way that they do things, right? Mm-hmm. But if you have somebody that is consistent in what they do, whether they're being watched or not, it's very easy to go, this person says is advocating for this. I know they're following it, even if I'm not watching it, because they are a consistent person, right? Mm-hmm. When you have somebody that's all over the fucking place, in the public's eye, there is no way of knowing behind the public's eye, in private, where that person stands, consistence-wise, moral-wise, right? Because you have no the baseline you're using in the public is all over the fucking map, right? That's why consistency is important, because it translates into the actions that you don't see.
To some degree, that's definitely a value.
Yeah.
I think when we apply this to Hassan, though, this might just come down to the value that we both put in Hassan. Because I obviously, even though I don't like him very much, I put a lot of value into him.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
I think the amount of good he's done in the world via his advocacy is, like, would be very difficult for him to counteract with actions that he could do, you know?
How do you know he's being the same base socialist in private, and he's not like, yeah, fuck these socialists. These socialists are fucking stupid. And everybody just kind of like goes along with it because he's got a lot of clout.
Well, I would say, if you're arguing, like, that would be, while I would prefer him not to do that, I would still say the amount that he has furthered socialism while still being against socialism. And if you're saying that he's like a massive grifter, but he's still like a really strong advocate for socialism online, I would still say that that action's like an overall positive. Because he's like furthered my movement, even though it's not his movement.
So
he's done me more help than he's done himself.
So the ends literally justify the means in your eyes.
I mean, yeah, in this case, right?
Okay.
I mean, this is the means justify the ends, kind of, you know.
Oh, okay. I don't know how you could ever condemn anybody else for doing the same.
Because they're contributing harm.
But right? It doesn't matter. They're using the exact same framework to justify their ends, right? It might not be yours.
Can you give me an example of something that
you could literally condemn? Anything. Like, I don't know how you could ever condemn a Nazi because they're just doing to meet their ends, right? They're doing.
I think that their ends are bad.
But it doesn't matter because they're using the exact same system you're using.
Not necessarily, right? They could be using your system. That doesn't mean.
Yeah, of consistency. Yeah, they could be.
Yeah, I don't like a consistent Nazi. I'll come out and say that. I think a consistent Nazi is like worse than an inconsistent Nazi.
Okay. I guess like if somebody's like somebody's able, like, I just feel like you're able to reform and actually know that the person is reformed for the person that's consistent. But I guess in your work,
I would say that can be really important. I would judge that by like their actions and their advocacy, right? So like let's pick someone that I think is actively a grifter, like Lauren Southern, right?
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of Lauren Southern. The reason that I'm able to condemn her is I don't think that her actions online have spoken well enough for moving towards a more positive movement.
Yeah, but if she's just using the movement to justify her own means, is that okay?
I would say if she was like, well, in this case, she's using, I think she is doing that to a certain degree.
Okay,
but then I would say that she's doing that and she's also contributing harm, right?
But why is that?
She's spreading a movement that I think is despicable.
But why is that? Why is going about it that way wrong?
Going about it that way? I don't know if I have a problem with the route that they take to do a bad action, but I still.
Well, it's a bad action in your eyes, though, right? But they're just using means to justify their ends, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that I can still hold an objective truth to what their ends are, right? I don't see that whatever they think is correct is correct.
Yeah, but they're just doing what's best for them, just like you're doing what's best for you, right? Not really separate from everything else, right? Separate from if it's actually producing, right? Because I wouldn't even argue that your system's really producing good actions, because it could be somebody just talks about it but never actually enacts it, and it never actually produces any good outcomes.
Yeah, that would be a conversation that I would think is like a really valuable.
Well, that's what this conversation boils down to, is somebody is able to just literally advocate, just talk about, but never actually has to enact, and that's okay.
So, and I've had this exact debate or previously, and it's hard to determine the value of what Hassan has contributed to the world, right? Or like the amount of like how much he's contributed to socialism.
Yeah, but
I can only use the like increasing trends of like younger people being more and more favorable towards socialism as time goes on, which was probably started by Bernie Sanders. It was probably increased like in colleges, and it was probably been increased by Hassan to a certain degree. So that's the only trend that I can really track, where like Gen Z is like the most favorable generation ever towards socialism as a whole, and that's the only stat I can like actually track. You know.
So how do you deal with, like, do you care about like people that grift at all?
Yeah, because I think typically
Wait.
people that grift are worse advocates for their movement. But like if someone was a grifter and like was a perfect advocate for socialism, I would still be happy, you know, because they're achieving the ends that I like. But I find that most grifters are usually not good advocates.
Do you think Mike from PA is a grifter?
Probably. I mean, he's kind of stated it, right?
Would you say he's a good advocate for socialism?
I don't personally think so.
Okay.
I think Mike
Does he
from
still
PA is
talk
so
about
dumb.
socialist issues though that have probably pushed some people into socialism that otherwise wouldn't be pushed?
Yeah, probably, and I think that's a positive action.
Okay. I guess like in my system that it'd be keeping people out of those spaces and actually putting people's money into actual better systems where the actions are actually being followed through on. But I guess like if the grifty part doesn't matter to like you, as long as somebody's out there preaching socialism, I guess like all power to you, man. I'm gonna adamantly disagree with it, but it's fine.
Well, like, do you think getting the outcomes you want is worth sacrificing this like amount of time that's being put into uh what you advocate for? Because like the way that I see it is socialism is never going to be achieved, or any kind of socialism that I like is never going to be achieved if we kind of just sit around and we spend time shitting on the best advocates for it, you know?
Okay, I guess like that. Maybe that's like the big difference too. Is you've picked like a system you want to see succeed, whereas I kind of like base it off ideas and actions that I want to see society partake in. Right, like you want to see it like not even in your lifetime a thing that'll succeed, and you want people to advocate for it now. When you're like aware, but I would rather have people do actions and advocate for things that they're actually going to partake in now.
Yeah, and you also, to some degree, have the advantage of. Oh, this is not a criticism, but you also have the advantage of living in a society where your ends are mostly achievable, right?
Not always.
Okay.
I mean, you guys
Like,
too, to some degree too, right? Like,
some of our actions, yeah.
yeah, okay.
But like socialism, I do not believe is going to be achieved in my lifetime. But you don't have to fight for capitalism to be achieved.
Sure, but then why would you advocate for something that's not going to happen now when you could advocate for better things and better actions and actually put actions into place that'll better people's lives now?
Yeah, I do advocate for that. And
Okay.
I think that should be done. I'm just saying that like the actions that you think will contribute the best to society for you are maybe an election cycle away, or I don't even know. I won't even say that. But a lot of the actions that your end goals are an election cycle away, while ours are generations away.
Okay, so in other words, I'm going to get more done than like you guys are.
Not necessarily get more done, but the things you want done will be done faster.
So in other words, meaningful change will come out of like my advocacy and my consistency, rather than like the griftiness nature will be like way down the line when like people like me catch up to like where you guys are now.
I think that's a little bit of a weird framing.
Oh, it's super loaded. I won't even deny that, right? Because that's the issue, though. Is like the difference is I'll advocate for stuff and then go do it to actually build positive change. And as that change slowly comes, there'll be more people like me that will advocate for ideas that are closer to you that will actually put them into motion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
well,
like,
I'm not against putting actions into motion. I think that's like an incredibly valuable thing. I would bet that Hassan would agree with that, and he would probably be in favor of putting effort towards that, right?
okay.
Like I'm not against getting things done in the meantime, but do you think we can achieve socialism in the next 10 years?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by socialism.
Market socialism. Every system is going to be a cooperative, or whatever, or over a certain size.
I don't think you're ever going to get that in humans' lifetime. I'll be honest with you, bud. I don't think humans are made that way. I think that would take a overhaul of how humans operate. to achieve something like that. But maybe that's just the way I look at people
Well,
and how they operate.
even just using that framing, that immediate resistance you have towards me suggesting that idea is like evidence that a massive cultural shift would need to happen for my ideas to come to place, right?
Yeah. But
So
but who's going to do that cultural shift? Because the people advocating for it don't have to do it, right?
What do you mean by cultural shift then?
But
'Cause
who's
I'm talking about changing people's minds, and that's what Hassan does.
okay? But how do you
moving more people onto it with his advocacy?
okay? I mean, I guess like part of advocacy is being a teacher, right? Is trying to teach people how to do things, and one of the things that be about being a teacher is like you have to show people how to do it or how like these systems work. And if you're like a teacher just sitting up at the blackboard, just like throwing facts and figures and shit at kids, and you don't actually teach them why the systems work or this is how they work, or you give like clear demonstrations of it when you're up at the front of the class, those students are going to walk away with like a lesser understanding and a lesser ability to actually partake in those systems and those
in order
things.
to, like, let's take a political teacher or a political science teacher.
Sure.
Do you think in order to teach democracy, you need to be able to hold a democratic election within the class?
I mean,
like
yeah,
a
that'd be a great idea. Absolutely. That would
agree it's a
would
good
get
idea,
it.
but
Well,
do you
that
think
would
it's
get it. That
necessary?
would get the point across, right?
But do you think it's necessary?
To have them actually understand it, yeah, I do actually.
In what way?
In what way? Because you're actually demonstrating the process to them, right? A lot of people learn by actually doing, and a lot of people, when you just explain things at people or get them to memorize things, they are not as efficient at like actually doing that thing as if you actually have them do it themselves, right? So if you're teaching a class on like democracy or like governmental systems, and you go with those students and you help them implement those systems and like partake in each one of those, you will have that far deeper in the kids' minds than just teaching them about it and walking away.
I agree that it would probably be far deeper, and I think that's like a really positive thing, right?
Okay.
But I don't think it's like inherently necessary in order to teach them to do that.
But if a better system exists and you know a better system exists, why would you just like slough that off instead of telling people this is what we should be doing? Right? Because I have said that.
That's a little bit of.
But you are though, right? Because we know a better system exists. We know that like showing people how to do, because you just agreed with me that showing people how to do something is far superior to just teaching at them, right?
Yeah, I agree with you, but
Okay.
the point that I'm making is that I think it is incredibly like difficult in order to do that through the lens like perfectly for everything. So like Hassan can personally demonstrate what it is to not be a house owner, I guess. Which
It's not even a house. Fuck off with it. It's not even a house owner. Just
Okay,
don't buy
what's
a
the
$2
example
million
you're
house. I live in, right now, you want to know what I live in? I live in a duplex, 1,100 square feet. I pay $1,000 a month. Even if I was making buco dollars, I probably still max would live in like a $400,000 home. Max. Because that's all I need. Anything more than
I
that,
agree
and
with
it starts to get exorbitant, right?
I agree with you. That's all you pretty much need. But does
Okay.
that come down to
So when
that's not from a personal prescription of like you don't think that anyone shouldn't be able to own this house. It's just an inconsistency in their positions.
No, but I'm not the one advocating against like people that have like exorbitant wealth and saying that this is bad and saying that we shouldn't have people with like this level of wealth in society because it makes wealth inequality like something that's like exacerbated when people have these levels of wealth, right? I'm not advocating for that stuff. This is the difference. Right? I'm not even advocating for it, and I wouldn't even buy an exorbitant house like that. That's the issue. Is you have somebody I think honestly we're just gonna like this is just like two different ways we were raised, and we're just unfortunately gonna always butt heads
It doesn't have
on
much
this
to do
part.
with, like how I was raised specifically. Like I understand that it comes down to like a hard raising, but I try not to like think about things through the lens of like what I try and purely think about them through the lens of what will get the most done, right?
Okay.
I guess that could be a way of the lens, but what you're kind of advocating for, right, is like earlier you kind of made the criticism that you think that you're going to be able to achieve all your goals in your lifetime and we're going to be taking like ages to do it because we're not creating a strong movement. Aren't you kind of advocating to weaken our movement?
No. If I tell you that I want to make $1 billion in my lifetime and I'm going to work hard this summer and pay off $10,000 worth of debt, Do you think having the larger goal invalidates the smaller goal? And does the smaller goal invalidate the larger goal?
Could you say that one more time? Sorry.
I want to make enough money to pay off $10,000 worth of debt. But I also have the dream that I will make $1 million in my lifetime or in the next 5 years. Does having the smaller dream invalidate the larger dream?
No.
Okay. Does being realistic about the smaller dream invalidate the larger dream?
No.
Okay. So when I tell you that there are policies that I will be able to reach in my lifetime, and there might be policies that you can then reach maybe further on in your lifetime, does that invalidate either of those?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, you are you have a problem with Hassan, right? You don't think he's a great advocate for socialism, and you think that we should condemn him for his actions here, right? That he shouldn't be owning a house.
You can call a man out when he does a bad and be like, hey, there's better ways to do this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, condemn is this... I've never said you had to condemn the man, though.
Okay. Maybe it's me. That was the argument that was happening in the Vosh, what is his name? Sorry, he just clicked on my name. That
Irrelevant?
was the argument between Vosh and Irrelevant. Yeah, he just clicked on my memory for a second. Irrelevant wanted to very strongly morally condemn Hassan.
Yeah, for that one action. That doesn't speak to his whole character. You understand that, right?
You're specifically interested in condemning him for owning this large house.
Yes, not his character as total, right? You can do both. You can say, hey, this action you did is pretty fucked up. You know, you advocate differently. You should probably try to follow what you're saying, right? But your character is still okay. Those statements are not those aren't contradictory to each other.
Okay.
Right, because good and bad is not binary, right? It's very much on a scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then I will absolutely say that, if you want, this is where we can agree, and I think Vosh even would agree with this, that, yeah, I think Hassan should be spending his time and money in better ways.
Okay.
So, to that end, you wouldn't disagree with Vosh's statement, right?
That if you're not going to do it, somebody else will?
Well, no, Vosh's entire argument was around, by morally condemning Hassan in this way, or, fully morally condemning him, that will, cause harm to our movement.
No, not at all. You can absolutely, no.
Yeah, that was absolutely the argument.
No, it was you could call him out for this one thing and still keep the movement alive. If you can't call him out for a single thing because it's going to kill your movement is weak. Your movement's on its last legs.
I do not think that is true. I think that is a poor analysis. There are plenty of times when a movement is in its infancy, and it is still very small, as leftism is in the United States or in the world as a whole, that you need to take whatever you can get.
Okay.
And I guess we could chalk it up to just disagreeing, but when it comes down to that statement, we can move. I guess we kind of moved off of it a little bit. But do you want to talk specifically about what Vosh said and where you disagree with Vosh?
Yeah, I mean, we can. I have one more question for you. Do you think Hassan should be spreading his viewers around more? Because if it's so reliant on one person, it's better to put all those eggs in more baskets?
I think that would probably be a positive. I think it's a positive thing when streamers in general spread around the love, you know?
It's not a question whether it's positive. Should he be? If your movement is that reliant on a single individual, should he be spreading those viewers around to strengthen that movement?
So I'm gonna draw a little bit of a distinction here, because I think should is a little bit of a difficult thing to move along there, right? So should you think that he is do you think he would be a bad person for not doing that? Is that what you're saying?
I think you'd be a foolish person if you're.
I agree, foolish.
Okay. Probably. Yeah, I probably wouldn't say he's a bad person. I think you're foolish and you actually don't care about your movement. If that's the case, if it's all reliant on one person. What happen? Okay, here's a question. What happens if Hassan dies tomorrow in a video game? Is it is your move? Well, is your movement just done?
No, but it would probably be set back quite a bit.
Okay. So should he be taking steps to mitigate the damage that is done to the movement by spreading that viewer base around more? I'll rephrase my question.
Yeah, where I'm like drawing a little bit of a difficulty here is like I think that it is a entirely good thing that he could do, and I would absolutely prefer that he would do it. I'm not okay with calling him a bad person, which is what should implies for not doing it. You know, or that action would be bad. You know, I think he is like doing very positive things, and that couldn't necessarily be a thing that like contributes to negativity, right? It's a difficult question.
Do you think I'm a bad person if I say I should take out the trash and I don't take it out?
Probably. I don't think that one action makes you a bad person.
Okay, so then in this case, when I use the word should, it's not making him a bad person if you say no, he shouldn't do that, right?
Yeah, okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
Okay.
And by that case, yeah, I would say he probably should.
Okay.
I would not stipulate that makes him a bad advocate or a bad part of the movement. I think he could be a better advocate.
Hang on. How does that not make him a bad advocate if he knows it's so weak and there are ways that he could go about to strengthen that movement so it's not as reliant on him if something was to happen to him? A contingency plan of sorts.
You're kind of saying weak there.
Well, no. I'm not. I'm the only reason I'm saying weak is because you're implying it's weak, implying that the one member of your community, if you lost it, would be a detriment to socialism, so detrimental that it would set you back 10 years.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll amend that statement a little bit. I think that might even be a little bit hyperbolic, saying it'll set me back 10 years.
Okay.
Because I have no idea how it would play out. I can only say that would be a very harmful thing that would happen to our movement, right? I'll take back that like really hard prescription.
Okay, so that if that really hard prescription is now off the table, what is the harm in calling him out when he does bad things like that? Bad things like not.
I would still say that it would set our movement back quite a bit. I don't know if I would. I thought about it a little bit more, and I think like 10 years is a lot. Just because I think like the reason I specify that is he's already kind of done a lot of the work, and I don't know if losing him would lose all the work that he's already done. You know, but if he never happened, that would be like 10 years lost. If that makes sense.
Okay, so then what would be the detriment at calling him out when he does things that go against like the idea of the movement?
Oh, I have no problem with calling him out for. Maybe we have like a different interpretation of what that debate was about. I have no problem with calling Hassan out.
Let's just say morally condemning for that action. What's the harm in there then if it's
for doing so, and we shouldn't like listen to him as an advocate
on at least that particular topic, right? If you're gonna have somebody that's gonna talk about wealth. It's just okay. I think we're gonna keep hitting this wall because I'm literally gonna loop. Like I was literally almost just about to repeat myself.
I'm kind of being I'm being a little bit weaselly here, but I'm like reforming what I was thinking of this argument. Sorry for taking a little bit to do.
No, that's fine. I don't care. I got time. It's just I feel like I'm fucking looping in this conversation. So
yeah, So I am absolutely fine with saying Hassan should be a better person and he should be doing more. I think that's true of everyone, not just Hassan. But I think what Irrelevant does, and this might be where we have our disagreement, is I don't think Irrelevant is actually interested in Hassan's like improving a movement. I don't think Irrelevant is interested in Hassan getting better as a person. At least that's the vibe that I got. I think Irrelevant mostly was interested in criticizing it because it is the destiny thing to do and it gets you good numbers. That's what I've been missing. I would say that's true.
Okay.
I don't even think that's like a bad thing to do either. I think taking a route to success is a good thing to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, like in yours, you, like the ends justify the means, right? So I don't know how you'd criticize it, right? Because he sees it as a good.
Apparently, a criticism either. I guess. I just think that he's incorrect. You know?
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not like inherently saying his action is bad.
Fair.
So, and do we disagree? I mean, I might just be wrong on how severe Irrelevant doesn't like Hassan.
Yeah, I think you're probably way overblowing it. Because I'm pretty sure in that conversation he did not say that he was a bad person overall. It was just that we need to call out like these actions as they come up.
Yeah, that was a terrible, like, on no part on either debater's half, that was an agonizing conversation, and I'm not interested in looking back into it.
Come on, let's rewatch it
So-
right now. Right now, we'll fucking bring it
The
up. We'll
full,
rewatch
like-
it.
The full 4 hours.
Fuck yeah, 2x that bitch. It probably loops just as much. So.
I will cede this ground that if Irrelevant is like, I'll cede the ground that if he's like truly interested in like bringing out better outcomes for like through socialism for Hassan, and he thinks that he should be a stronger advocate, I'll say that's true. I just remember like this distinct moment when in that debate, and I might be misremembering, when Vosh like did a pretty good job of pointing out that Irrelevant's interests are not aligned very well with Hassan. And like when he pointed out the amount of videos that Irrelevant has made about his dislike for Hassan, and that's been like one of his like large claims to fame at this point. I think he did a pretty good job at demonstrating that this is not coming out of a honest and like a true way to interact with Hassan and looking at his prescriptions. That's just not the vibe that I got. But
Sure.
I could be wrong.
Could you also think the vibe that could be from Irrelevant that he notices a bunch of other large lefty creators not calling out bad actions when he sees them, so he feels that like it's a little bit of his imperative to call them out and be like, hey guys, like here's some things you're missing, and so like that's going to kind of fuel making videos on like one of the largest content creators when no other like lefty in the space is calling it out.
Well, in that conversation, I'm pretty sure Hassan said that he would prefer Hassan to do better things, right? Do you think that's not enough?
Well, no, because he said it would just be good, but he doesn't have to, right? And then that's where we disagree. That's where the disagreement always comes up, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, I think, and this is the same issue that I was having earlier, where should is doing a lot of work, and I would say there's a lot of range. Like, I will say you shouldn't, like, well, I'll use shouldn't, but that's like the inverse of should, so I think that's fair to use. You shouldn't kill someone, and that should is doing the same work as you should take out the trash, where they're both should, but there's a wide range of the moral condemnation that should come from not doing that thing, you know?
Yeah, and I guess that where if you were really like wanting people to do the better change and pushing people, I would say that statement should go from a should to an ought. We ought to be practicing what we preach. We ought to be practicing what we advocate for. We ought to be showing people that the way forward, right? If you're going to be an advocate for it. So it's just, I looked at other advocacy groups that advocate for stuff. It'd be really weird for like climate change people to be like, we ought to, not spend 14 hours a day on a computer and then watch them spend 14 hours a day on a computer, right?
Well, that's the same thing that they did against Al Gore, right? They criticized him for flying in a jet.
Yeah, absolutely, as they should have.
I don't view that as a valuable, at least a valuable criticism to make. And there's the other part of that where I think in reality that is and I think this might be my biggest issue with a lot of those arguments, is I think people spend more time talking about the one individual bad action that this person took rather than the advocacy that comes from that. Like I don't see.
Well, and guess what? That's part of getting that face of the movement, right? Is you have to put on the show. You have to do what you're advocating for, or people are just going to look at you like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like you're not even.
Well, no, I would say that's absolutely not the case. I would say that is
okay.
Purely something that happens in left-wing movements. It does not happen otherwise. People don't criticize Nazis for not following up on their actions. People criticize Nazis for having bad ideas.
Yeah, think about that. If you have Nazis that are inconsistent, and then you're like, yeah, but we're just doing what they do, just in like different ways, right? Aren't you supposed to be better than the Nazis?
We are better than Nazis. We have better ideas.
Well, you have better ideas, but you don't have a better way to execute those ideas.
I think we all have the same means to execute ideas, and I don't.
Yeah,
think
we're just following through with your ideas.
I don't think inherently having better or worse means makes a movement bad or good.
Okay.
Like, for example, I think that's like a really good thing to point out, because people don't spend and I wonder what you think about this. I don't think there is a way to be a consistent Nazi, unless and to be a normal person in society.
Yeah, that's probably true.
So if every Nazi, and there are a good portion of people that are Nazis online, was consistent, there would be no Nazi advocacy ever. And I'm not saying Nazi advocacy is a good thing, but there are a lot more Nazis around because they're inconsistent than whether they're consistent.
Yeah, so wouldn't you want people to adopt my style of doing things so that we have less Nazis?
Oh, yes, I absolutely would love the Nazi. Well, no, actually, no. I prefer the Nazis weaker in any way for that to happen. If that was through them being consistent, I prefer it. If that was through them being inconsistent, I prefer it. If consistency meant they went out and killed people, I would not be in favor of that.
But that's the thing, though, is right. Is like if we believe that it, like if you truly believe that being consistent in your beliefs would make it impossible to be a Nazi, you should be with me and advocating that everybody live consistently by their principles or their values or the things that they advocate for.
Well, I don't think a Nazi being consistent is a positive thing, though.
But it doesn't matter because you've already agreed that they couldn't be a Nazi and consistent, and that if they had to be consistent living in their values, it would push them out of those values, right?
Well, like, to be fair, and you might agree with me or disagree with me, I don't think it's capable to be 100% consistent all the time, ever. I think everyone has some inconsistencies, and I think that's part of being human.
Sure, you might have ideals that you don't always live up to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I consider myself, I try to be a strong advocate for my movement, and I try and live to my values. I order things from Amazon. I work for Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
I get them quite a bit of money, and I don't think that is inherently wrong, because I think, on one hand, we all have to work. I think we have to have hobbies to some degree. I think it's almost impossible to participate within capitalism without benefiting some group that I'm not like a huge fan of. So, to a degree, I'm inconsistent, but I don't think that encapsulates my ability to be a good advocate. And I think that doesn't mean that I'm not working towards better goals. Not perfect goals, but better goals.
Okay.
Do you know if you would agree with that? Like, do you think that
I would disagree. But
yeah,
if you're like, man, I really hate fucking Amazon. Fuck Amazon. This Amazon company is like the worst company in the world. And then you went and bought everything from Amazon and worked there. Well, yeah, I
don't necessarily think Amazon is like the worst company.
Oh, then it wouldn't apply. It wouldn't apply to you, right?
But well, no, I still think it is a wrong thing to contribute to Amazon, but I think that's like an almost unavoidable thing.
No, you could probably absolutely do it. Are you like, can you leave are you unable to leave the house in any capacity?
I'm unable to buy food without benefiting capitalism.
Well, no, that's not, well, hang on. Do you have to buy your food from Amazon?
No.
Okay. So you can leave the house, you can go get your groceries. Do you have to buy things from Amazon, or is it extremely convenient to buy things on Amazon?
It's convenient to do so. I actually don't buy my food from Amazon. My point was, if I was buying it from someone else, I would still be benefiting a company that I'm usually not in favor of. That's actually a little bit different for me, because I actually live near a employee-owned company that sells food, which I usually buy from. So that's a little bit different, but most people don't have that advantage.
Sure. But if you were to rally against, like, I think it's
impossible to be like. For example, you
can't. It's not even. No, hang on. It's not about. You don't have to go to like the biggest, broadest thing to be like, hey, you rally against Amazon. Well, I have to engage in a capitalist society. Yes, we all agree. Wow, we get it. Okay. It's the thing comes down to is when you're sitting here and you're like, man, this company is really, really bad. It does bad things with its employees. It treats its employees like shit. And then you're like, you know what? Instead of taking like the extra half an hour to go buy something, I'm just gonna go buy it. I'm just gonna order from Amazon because that's easier for my life, right? You are a hypocrite and you are contributing to the problem. Unfortunately, that's just how it works. Because you could take that extra time, right? You might be able to, right? If you could, right, take that extra time with with minimal detriment to yourself, and you choose not to, and choose to order from Amazon, and then rally against them, I would say you're doing a bad thing.
Yeah, but that's in the specific case that I think Amazon is like especially egregious, and I do actually think that Amazon is like pretty bad. But there are like, it's impossible. I do technically own a car, but I never use my car. I'm incapable of like actually using a car to get anywhere. I'm incapable of ever taking flights. I would handicap my ability to work within my system so much if I was like to be as consistent as I should be. I think, unfortunately, for someone that believes like me, it's almost impossible to be consistent.
Sure. Well, actually, it's not, because you would refine kind of how you look at it, right? It's not that don't ever order from Amazon. Amazon is the worst company in the world. Try to limit your purchases to Amazon, right? If you can go out and get something that's not related to Amazon, do that instead, right? That becomes your advocacy.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but then
that would still be hypocritical.
Well, no, because you're limiting you're actually following it because you're trying to limit the purchases that you take from it, right? If that was your
still be ordering from Amazon.
Yeah, but you're limiting. That's what I said, limiting, right? If your advocacy then wasn't that don't ever order from Amazon, but your advocacy was try to limit the purchases that you get from Amazon, I would say that you ordering from Amazon when you need to, when you have no other way of getting it, is following through with your advocacy and is being consistent.
I don't know if that would. So, like, let's say I'm gonna apply it to a different example, if that's okay.
Yeah,
okay?
Go ahead.
If you are in favor of, like, we talked about this earlier, where if you're in favor of eating less meat, and you think that veganism is like the only true ethical system, but it can be really difficult to not eat meat at times. Now, it's not. Do you think that you like just taking steps to reduce eating meat? Do you think that they're still being hypocrites? Do you think when
no, if they're okay. So the different okay, yeah, I don't know if you want to write down the differences in the advocacy is saying we should never eat meat, right? Versus reduce your meat consumption. If the person saying reduce your meat consumption on the off chance engages in like eating meat, that's being consistent. But if you have somebody that's like never eat meat, meat is murder, only be veganism, and then you see them chowing down at the fucking McDonald's on a Big Mac, that person is the hypocrite. That is the person you should ignore.
But, like, so you don't think that the, what do you think of the amount of, like, vegans that hate on vegetarians?
Yeah, I think they're idiots.
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, because I haven't heard this. Usually, okay, I think that adds to your argument a little bit. So, if, like, when we go back to, like, the Nazi thing, I guess, so you would say that Nazis are not hypocrites if they advocate for pushing in the right direction of Nazism? Would that logic still apply there?
I'm sure. Do you have like a specific example you could give? Like if they're saying let's say for example, a Nazi is like, you know what, we should have an ethno-state. Okay, this is obviously a pure hypothetical. I don't care if it gets clipped out of context. I don't give a fuck. They're like, we should. You
can pick something else if it's.
No, I don't give a fuck. I'll deal with it. This is a perfect example. If you have a Nazi that's being like, hey, we should have ethno-states, and then they go live in like an all-black neighborhood, I would call that person a hypocrite.
What if they're a black Nazi?
Yeah, well, then if that's the ethno-state they want to set up, they're a black Nazi and they're like, we should have black ethno-states, and they go live with like a bunch of white people in the fucking suburbs, yeah, that guy's a hypocrite, right? But if they're like, we should like stop immigration, or like we should reduce like X certain people we're living around, and they took steps, that person would not be a hypocrite. They're still a piece of trash, right? They're just not a hypocrite, right? That's the other thing too, is you can be a piece of trash and not a hypocrite, and be a good person and still be a hypocrite at times, right? That's my issue, is that we need to get this fucking binary way of fucking thinking about things out of our fucking heads. It's cancer. It's fucking garbage for us.
I 100% agree with you, and I think that plays into my problem when we talk about all this stuff. But now I'm going to ask you, and this might be where we disagree.
Okay.
How correlative is being a hypocrite to being a bad person for you?
I think it would depend.
Okay.
I think it would depend.
Right.
Yeah.
I think through that lens, I 100% agree with you, and I think you are 100% correct.
Fuck yeah.
I think
we agree
on that entirely.
Nice.
We can have the... We spent a long time talking about...
Fuck yeah, that was nice. Thank you. I enjoyed this. I needed to get some fucking frustration out. Thank you for letting me scream at you.
No problem. That's... Hey, I debated Econoboy. I'm going to be debating Fabian Liberty. I can handle a little bit
nice.
Canadian,
good.
Right?
It's good. We gotta yell at each other every now and then. Doesn't mean I don't love you any less, okay?
I did have to continue. This might make you happy. I did have to continually lower my desktop audio because you kept getting louder.
Fucking rights. I gotta scream every now and then. I gotta keep Duber happy. Or else he's gonna fucking jump ship again. I can't have that. He's my only chatter.
There was the one other element I think we can talk about.
Sure, I got half an hour.
We can talk about the take, like the specific Vosh take,
Sure.
where like owning a house is like, and being a landlord isn't inherently bad if you advocate against it.
Okay.
Would you apply that logic? Like, how would you apply that logic to that means, right?
So
So if you can be a hypocrite, if you can be a good person, an action can be good, and you can still be hypocritical.
Mhm.
Do you think that an action can be good, while still that person being a hypocrite? And do you think being a hypocrite is something worth criticizing someone over through that lens?
Yeah, because I think when you call somebody out as being a hypocrite, I think you're pointing to flaws that they have in their thinking and that they need to address and need to shift one way or another, right? It could be that you point out somebody's being a hypocrite and they go, "Oh shit, I didn't realize that this belief I held is actually incorrect. Thank you for calling me out on that." And they can kind of like introspect and kind of shift their belief along with that. Or the same could be said for an action, right? It could be that somebody has like a correct belief on something, but their action is being hypocritical and they need to reassess their action. I think honestly, and that's what I think my biggest issue was with like a lot of these discussions, is that when you call out somebody being a hypocrite, it's almost like when people push back, they don't want to introspect on why somebody is calling them a hypocrite in that instance, right? So, and that's when this conversation comes into play, and I actually would say would be the most important conversation that we can have. So,
I agree with you that it is a really important conversation to have, and this is, I do want to discuss this, but I want to point out my slight fears when it gets to that kind of conversation, because I see a large amount of conversation about leftism being detracted by whether the advocates are being hypocrites or not. So like, I would say the majority of shit that Destiny throws against Hassan. No, I think it's fine to throw shit against Hassan. I think it's fine for Destiny. I think his actions are fine. I don't think he holds the best positions, but I think his actions are fine. I would say that the majority, and I have no way to track this, but a large amount of his criticisms have been about hypocrisy as opposed to actually criticizing his positions. And that's what I kind of fear.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of this time is spent not talking about what is correct and incorrect. It's talking about whether someone is or isn't a hypocrite, you know? And I don't like that. And unfortunately, that's kind of the way that the world is, and that's why, while I think I actually agree with you on a lot of aspects on your take, the reason that, while I think this conversation can still be really important to have, I fear this conversation a little bit, because I think it is mainly a detractor from actually talking about policy a lot of the time.
Well, and I would agree with that, but I think that's a both party issue, right? And it kind of comes back to what are we saying when we're calling somebody a hypocrite, and the introspection that needs to take place to wonder if that is like a legitimate concern or not, right? And when you have these conversations and somebody brings up, "Hey, I think you're being a little hypocritical here," and then all you get is pushback that this person is like a bad person or wrong person, right? And it takes forever to get the point across that that's not the issue. I think that is on both parties having the conversation, right? I would put it like 51-49 on the people that immediately jump to he's just a bad person, instead of what do I need to what about it, like what do I need to introspect about to not be a hypocrite, right? I think it's pretty even, it's close, but I'd put it just a little bit more on the person that's like, oh, you're just saying this person is a bad person and there's no introspection needed on why this person is being called a hypocrite.
Yeah, I agree with you in a lot of ways, and the thing that I see, and the reason that I've had this debate, this specific exact conversation, probably even more than capitalism socialism debates that I've had, right? I've had this exact conversation like so many times, and what I kind of think is a lot of people use. I'm not saying that you use this argument. I actually do not think you use this argument that way. I think a lot of people do use hypocrisy claims to try and attack a position they know that they cannot actually attack. And I think it is a pretty rhetorically effective way to do so that people like Destiny have utilized a lot of the time.
I don't know about that, because if there's like a large swath of people that don't like, because you kind of alluded, I don't know, like, do you think most people care about the optics of being a hypocrite?
Probably a lot of people do.
Okay.
I think a lot of people haven't like put a ton of thought into like I think a majority of people do not have not put a ton of thought in what it takes to consider someone bad or good, you know?
Okay.
I think they kind of just move with whatever their internal
Okay.
feelings work with. And internally it can feel very bad to be a hypocrite for any reason, you know?
Okay. Yeah, probably generally agree with that. Okay, then yeah, I'd probably generally agree that most people are using it for optics. It's probably a dick move. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's why once again I made it like it's not just a one party thing. Because while I think that some people definitely can use it for optics, and I'm sure that, knowing Destiny the man that he is, he probably has in the past used it as a way to like obfuscate the conversation. But I do think that sometimes that when we talk about these conversations, there are people that will immediately also attribute maliciousness when no maliciousness is there. And I think these are really hard conversations to have. Obviously, indicative of the conversation we just had. So,
Yeah, now we unfortunately, now that we have done all that work, I 100% agree with everything you said there, and I want to actually have the interesting part of the conversation now.
Based.
Now that we've done the optical arguments that I usually have a problem with.
Now that I'm a Nazi, let's go. Just kidding. JK in a video game.
Whether or not an action is bad because someone else would do it, we can even remove. I think we can entirely remove the hypocrisy argument. We can say, let's say that we both agree, owning a really expensive house is bad, right?
Okay.
Just for the sake of this argument.
For shits and giggles. Yep.
Yeah. If we both agree that owning a really large house is bad, do you? Okay, no wait. Let me take that back. Because I guess that is a hypocrisy argument. Do you think owning a really large house is inherently wrong? And you would say no, correct?
It depends. Honestly, honest to God, I would say that like if you want to own it, like go for it. I would say at best it's morally neutral.
Okay.
I think maybe in some instances it could be definitely morally wrong. I think that one too is like very situational, depending on where you live. Kind of like what your wealth is, kind of probably mostly to do with where you live and what country you're in, right? Because what might be a big house in like, let's say Canada, might seem bigger to somebody else in like I don't know, Vietnam or like China or something, right? So like that scale, like somebody living in like in a small apartment in Japan is going to come to my duplex and be like, holy fuck, your place is huge, right?
I would say anyone living in New York would also say that.
Yeah, I would say my place is huge. I have so much fucking space, right? So yeah, I guess it depends on what you mean by big house.
Do you think so?
Hang on. You know what? I would say owning more space than you know what to humanly do with is probably not something we should be doing.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
I think I think that's a really good rule to follow, actually. Yeah. I would say. So do your criticisms come out of a hypocritical lens, or do they come out of you think that him owning this house is bad?
A little bit of both. It's a little bit of criticism of both. I think when you have like the wealth and the size of that house, right? Because especially when you're a streamer, let's face it, like streamer, like after watching like streamers move across countries to literally different countries, all over the place and still keep their job with them, it's hard for me to see an argument that says I have to live in this house at this specific location with like and this exorbitant cost. It just that doesn't jive with me. So
okay. What would like I don't know if Like the thing that I might be a little bit hung up on is I'm not sure if Hassan's house fits that qualification fully because like I think his house is expensive, right? But it is like and it's pretty big, but it's not like a m- a multi-million dollar mansion, right?
Well, it literally is though. It's $2.5 million.
But it's not like a there's like much bigger houses than the one Hassan bought, right?
Sure. There's much reasonable places too.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm so how many bedrooms do you think that one like individual would reasonably have then?
I think honestly, depending on your family size, if you have a
Well,
family
let's say that
size,
you're alone living in you are alone. You only live by yourself
you only live
for the
alone,
moment.
like two
Yep.
bedrooms, maybe
Okay.
three, maybe depending on how often you have company.
Okay.
And
And
again,
then would that go up by one by each person you have, or does it go differently?
yeah, I would go like if you have kids, like generally like when they grow older, they need their own space, right? So you would try to seek
Hmm.
to like usually have one kid per bedroom, as like maybe bourgeoisie as that is. Um,
No, I think that's not bourgeoisie.
Yeah,
I
and then
will
like when you have like what usually one bedroom for the parents, and then once again, if you're somebody that has guests a lot, you could maybe have like one or two more bedrooms to go along with that. But I think anything more than that, and you're starting to get super exorbitant.
Okay. Uh,
And
isn't
then
Hassan's like a six bedroom? I forget.
I have no clue. I did not follow it
Okay.
that closely.
Regardless, I guess. I think I'd probably agree with you that he could have been more, like a bit better at choosing his house and he didn't need all the space. I'd probably agree with you on that. Now, do you want to talk about like the hypocrisy parts of it?
Oh fuck! Did we not already do that? Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Well, no, like we talked about a little bit of it,
Okay.
but we talked about one side of it. I'm not sure. I want to address the Vosh portion that you brought up, where if someone is going to buy a house, or like if a plot of land has to be owned, whether it should be owned or not, right? And we can talk about that part.
Okay.
So that was your main contention with Vosh, right? That saying that because someone has to own a house, uh, it's morally neutral to do so, right?
Well, it's not that somebody has to. It's if somebody is going to buy it anyways, you might as well be
Hmm.
the one to do it.
Well, and this is where I'm gonna hold truth for Vosh. I don't like land cannot go unowned, right? It has to be in the hands of an individual at all times.
No, you can let it sit there on the market. You don't have to own it.
Well, even when it's held on the market,
Yeah, but
uh,
you don't have to buy it, right? The real estate agency can continue to hold that forever until it sells to
yeah, but
somebody
that would be
else.
the real estate agency, right? And then that house would not be being used by those means, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, like, do you think that I guess as long as we like exist in the current system, I think buying a house that is like like some of those like 20 apartment house like 20 room like 20 bedroom apartment or not apartments but houses are massive,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure if Hassan like reaches that level fully, and I'm not sure if even like that house would be fully banned in Hassan's perfect utopia, you know. I think to a certain degree, you could make an argument that someone should like only own a house where they have the means to do so. But I would say that you still have a right to own a house of his size. When you get much bigger, I think that those houses should probably not be used because it's really hard to get efficiency out of houses that have like so much land space, you know?
Depending on how many people you have in it, it would actually be more efficient than a
Well,
bunch of
like that's
individual houses.
the difficult part is because when you have like a ton of bedrooms, that you become limited with I, like the energy consumption goes like way up compared to the when you would have them normally housed. I believe I could be wrong about this information.
It would depend.
There's a lot.
The only reason the
Mhm.
energy consumption would go up is because each bedroom has to have a window. But as your windows get better, it would actually be more efficient than building a separate house to house like more of those people,
You
right?
also have to have lighting, and you have to have the any kind of wiring, and I'm pretty sure. I could be entire. I'm thinking about this now, and I might not go through that, but I'm pretty sure, and I'll drop this argument, but there is like some line where the houses, like when they get that big, are just like inefficient to utilize for housing, and they're like way more efficient to use for other purposes.
But
So
if
I'm gonna
it, but
drop that for now.
I would, because then you're arguing against apartments.
Like by what means? I'm arguing against like really
Yeah,
wide.
but if you have that house full and every room is occupied, what is that? What's the difference between that and an apartment?
An apartment goes up and these houses go out.
You could build that house up. You can build a 2-story house, like, huge. A lot of
Yeah,
these,
and I
yeah,
think, and that's fine. But the problem is these houses typically aren't, right?
yeah. But if you built a big house like that, let's say you built a 10,000 square foot house upwards, right? So it's actually 20,000 square feet. Would you say that's okay as long as as long as all those rooms are filled?
If you can utilize the space well, I would say that's fine by me.
Okay. So then, like, the size isn't the issue. It's how big of a footprint it makes when you build the house and to what degree it's utilized. So size is
Yeah,
irrelevant.
it's purely
Yeah.
the utilization. I believe there's some. I
I mean, you're literally
just
talking
don't
to a
have
guy
the
that works in like
information on
residential construction. So
I well, I, yeah, I'm gonna cede the ground to you.
Okay.
It's purely about whether it can be utilized.
yeah,
And I've like heard some stats like the harder that it gets harder to utilize that land because of like, the way they're built. But I don't care.
yeah. Because the issue is a lot of rich people want to build out their space out instead of up, right? But if you built that space up just like an apartment building, it would be no different than like.
Yeah, I'm in favor
Yeah.
of building them up.
Okay.
I'm massively in favor of expanding. We need to build up more than out. That's like what we need to do.
Yeah.
So then is your pure criticism that so we've gotten through the hypocritical parts of it, and you just don't like that he bought a house personally, and you disagree with his decision, right?
That he bought a house? No, I don't give a fuck that he bought a house.
this specific house.
It's that he bought an over exorbitant house.
Yeah, I think that is a fine criticism to make, and I probably agree with you to some degree.
Okay. Because well, I mean, you would have to you would have to, because like isn't like one of the things of socialism is like using more than like what the other people are, right? Isn't that kind of like the whole point of a co-op? Is everybody's kind of like equal in that like business and shit?
Yeah, I mean, like it can depend, right? So I think I mentioned this earlier. I differ when it comes to housing to a lot of socialists.
Okay.
Where a lot of socialists think that you need to fully like nationalize the at least as far as I understand it, I'm not trying to strawman anyone. That you need to fully like not privatize, make housing public, and I don't agree with that fully. I think that a portion of housing should be public, but I don't agree with all of it.
Okay.
So I might just differ when it comes to socialists. Though I do think that like when you have land should be used well, right? And I'm not sure whether I would use state force to push that, but I do think overall land should be used efficiently.
So I have a question for you. If it was just the hypocrisy argument, what's wrong with that?
If it was just the hypocrisy argument, I think that mostly it has nothing to do with him like actually making a good or bad decision.
Well, it does to some degree, because obviously it's making me question whether or not I want to join the movement, right? Because I'm raising these concerns to somebody that it's like, hey, I'm watching this guy, I'm seeing what he's doing, I'm not liking what he's doing, I don't really feel like I want to associate with that, right?
My next question would be, why would you follow that logic? Because to me, and I don't mean to seem like a robot, but that doesn't seem like truly logical to me. Whether you participate in a movement, like for example,
but don't you want? Hang on. Don't you want your movement to grow?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so do you think I'm the only one that has this criticism?
Probably not.
Okay, so if you notice that it's limiting your movement to grow, and I bring it up to you, and you tell me, don't fucking worry about it, right? I'm not saying you're telling me that that way, but you're bit. It's more or less what you're saying to me is like, well, you don't have to be a part of this movement, but you're like, you've actively.
No, that's not what I was gonna say.
Okay.
What I was gonna say is, like, I was gonna question where I was gonna go is like, why are you thinking along the lines of hypocrisy is like should deter you from working in this movement. I agree that people think that way, but I actually think that going down, like deciding what movement you support based on whether you think like the individual is good or not is not the best way to make
But
a decision.
that's not what it's based off of. It's based off things I believe, and then this person isn't lining up with what I believe. And when I address these issues with somebody in that movement, they're dismissing me.
Well, yeah, but if you're so that's different, right? So
But no,
your personal like thinkings do not line up with someone else's. I think that is entirely fair to criticize them.
okay.
What's being criticized here is him not lining up with his own prescriptions.
Yes, because it's something that I don't recognize, and I go, hey, and then people go, hey, this doesn't align with your values. Like, this isn't really a movement that I would want to join. And you guys are like basically the movement's like, well, what the fuck does it matter? What do you matter, right?
So you still think that? Well, you kind of mixed lines a little bit there. So let me quickly clarify. You would say that following going by reason, if someone is not following their own logic, that you should still not follow that, be a part of that movement because they're not following their own logic, or like a strong advocate in that movement is not following that logic.
It's not even that. It's that you're trying to push somebody for me. That you're saying this is an advocate for our movement, and when I look over and I see your advocate for your movement, and it's not somebody I want to follow based off what I believe, you're basically saying tough titties. If you want to join this movement, you have to put up with this leader. And when I call out and we go, hey, this person doesn't really act in a way, and it could be something that you could address to pull in more people through your movement. What the responses that people are met with is, just tough tits. Suck it up.
Yeah,
Suck it up or buttercup.
I think it's a fine response to have from an individual. Like, for example, because I don't like I'll just go, I don't like police officers, right? So if someone is a police officer and they do like a really bad thing as a police officer, that's an individual decision because I can apply my morality to their situation. But what you're kind of saying is that we should apply Hassan's own morality to a situation that doesn't apply, which is what I disagree with. So like, I'm fine with people that adopt Hassan, like their own logic to criticize Hassan from their personal logic. What I do not like is when people criticize Hassan from his own logic, because I think it's hard to beyond that.
What? You don't like it when people try to hold Hassan to the things he says or advocates for?
I think it's typically good when they actually believe that thing. But like, for example, I'm not gonna this is the exact thing that we talked about earlier. I don't care about holding a Nazi to their prescriptive statements. It's not something that I'm interested in.
Well, yeah, because you're not trying to get people to go over to that movement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're trying to get people to come over to Hassan's movement, and I'm telling you that this is an issue that exists, and you're just basically telling me to go away.
No, I'm not telling.
Well, you are though, because you're saying it doesn't matter. You're saying this is the issue. Is people bring up issues with the socialist movement. Hey, here's an issue that we see, and you're just like, well, if you want to be part of the movement, this is just like, we just kind of roll with it. And it's like, okay, well then I'm not going to join the movement, right?
You're not bringing up issues with the movement. You're bringing up
someone
else's issues.
It's an issue that I have with the movement. I have an issue that your movement is filled with grifters and hypocrites.
Yeah, so we can follow down that logic.
Okay.
Why do you think that is?
Because
inherently, and I agree with you.
We're looping. No, we have to stop. We're looping and this is the issue though, is that you're not listening. You're trying to dismiss. I know you're active. No, you are actively listening to what I'm saying, but you're saying I know you are, but you're saying that my issue that I'm raising to you doesn't matter.
No, I'm trying to understand why your issue matters.
And I've told you it's because I believe that this is something that when we advocate for something and when we talk about something, I believe that we should be showing people how it's done. And I've said that like multiple times, that to be a good leader, you need to be able to do it show your people how it's done, right? And every time I bring that up to you you tell me that it shouldn't be important to me. But I am trying to actively tell you that it is important to me. It's something that I stand for. And every time I bring it up,
I understand that, but so where I'm trying to get into is, and I understand that.
But you're trying to tell me it shouldn't matter.
I to a certain degree I agree with that statement, but I'm trying to understand, and like what I'm trying to have a conversation about whether it should matter or not. I'm not saying that no, it shouldn't matter. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from, and because I disagree that matters to as strong of a degree, and that's what I would be disagreeing about, right? Because I don't think that, because I think to every degree someone is going to be a hypocrite. You could argue that maybe Hassan is more of a hypocrite than otherwise, but I think it is like impossible to avoid that in any movement, you know?
I agree. But when it's consistently brought up that, hey, might be something that is stopping people from joining your movement, and it's constantly told that it doesn't matter, you shouldn't be having this conversation, it's not important, we don't understand why it matters, and people try to tell you that, like, this is how we think, like, this is how we perceive things, this is how I do things, because I think that, like, consistency and trust and all this stuff is important for me to want to be part of a movement. And then it just keeps like, well, why is it important? Why do you think it? And I keep saying, and I keep repeating myself, and I feel like I'm fucking looping. That's the frustrating part, right? Because I can understand from your perspective, it doesn't matter because the socialist movement is being furthered by having somebody who's a very strong advocate for it be in this movement, even if they're not the greatest advocate for it in the way that they practice their things, right? They could be better at it. And I'm telling you that every time this conversation comes up, it's dismissed, it's put off, it's pushed to the side, and people's concerns are taken with a grain of salt. And that is what frustrates people with this movement, and why they get so angry when we call out like somebody's being a hypocrite and it's just ignored. That's the issue, right? You're right. We can quibble all day long about whether it's important or not, but every time it comes up, that's not even the argument that ends up happening. It's that the argument is like, it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter.
No, those are not like necessarily unlinked things, because like from a large portion of well, let me ask you this. So a large portion of socialists that are on board with whatever Hassan has done are fine with the actions that Hassan has taken. That's kind of obviously true by the amount of followers that follow him, right? They haven't like gone, oh, I can't work with him for this reason. So for a lot of people, they're already following this logic, where they're saying, okay, Hassan might not be the best advocate. It's almost impossible to be the best advocate when you're like, through the actions of like not paying your mods, and through your actions of like not always paying your editors best, through owning an expensive house, whatever. If you could argue that might not line up with his system, but for a lot of the people that are already a part of his movement, they don't really feel that way. They think that everyone is human. Everyone makes mistakes, and you have to contribute to a certain degree, and you have to accept that to every degree. So where we're kind of coming from, we're trying to explain our system. And if you have a problem with that, I hold this position that you are allowed to dislike a person at all for any reason that you have. And I think that should be true of any person. I think no matter what, you are allowed to just have personal preferences when it comes to people. And we talked about this a little bit, but where I disagree is whether that movement becomes inherently negative or not. And I think that someone can absolutely still be inconsistent in their positions and still be correct when it comes to what they say. And I think that correctness is what matters more when it comes to a movement, as opposed to the internal, holding 100% internal consistency.
Okay.
And we might just disagree. And I guess that's kind of where we got to leave it, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because like it's just one of those things that you go, well, it's with inside the movement, everybody's okay with it, and it's like, okay, well, I guess that's as big as the movement. I guess that's as big as the movement grows, right? Because like I come to voice an opinion that I'd be like, hey, you could get somebody like me on your side, and then I voice it, and it's just I'm told that it doesn't matter and shouldn't matter.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. Would if Hassan was the perfect advocate for socialism and he did all these great things, would that make you more likely to become a socialist?
If he actually lived what he was talking, yeah, it probably would. Yep, 1,000,000%. Yep.
If you don't mind me asking, because I actually think that's a little bit...
I swear to God, if you ask me why, I'm going to lose it. But I'm assuming that's what's coming, because we're going to fucking loop, and I'm going to lose my mind.
Well, we can stop it there, I guess. I'll just say that I That's not how I make my decisions about
Yeah,
something.
but listen what you're saying. You're saying I'm making my decisions wrong and therefore I have to adopt your way of making things or I am inherently wrong. Hey, listen how arrogant you are.
No, that's not what I'm
Well, that is what you're saying because I'm saying that I have a certain way of doing things and I like doing it this way and this is the way that it fits with my worldview and it's how I trust people. It's how I know that a movement is good and all this stuff. And you're like, well, that's not how I would do it. And it's like, well, then you're not even fucking listening to me. You're already presupposing that you have the best system for this.
So, to a certain degree, I would agree with you that I'm trying to argue that my system is a better way of making decisions, right? And I'll agree with that. But I'm not trying to be. I think where you kind of see arrogance, I think that would be true of any debate that you were ever having. Because every conversation is trying to prove that your way of thinking is better than someone else's way of thinking.
Do you realize there's a way of proving that your way might be better of doing things versus being arrogant upon how you do that?
I've only tried.
Okay, do you think you're at the peak? Do you think you're at the peak system right now in your life? Like this is the best it's going to get for your moral system, your thinking, everything like that?
Probably not. It'll probably change.
Okay. So the difference is right there, right? When I tell you, "Hey, this is the way that I do it," and then you go, "Well, you know what? That doesn't really it doesn't make sense. I don't think you should do things like that. You should be doing it this way because it will lead you to better." You can do that in a way without sounding arrogant, and it comes off very arrogant when you're dismissing that. Let's hey, this is how I live my life. This is how I know you might not actively be doing it, but it very and this right here when I'm telling you this is the feeling that I'm getting, right? This is a point of introspection, right? Well, why is he feeling this way? Because I'm trying to tell you that this is something that has been very beneficial to my life and has allowed me to keep grifters and people that have done harm to me in my life away from me or done bad movements or bad intentions, because it's a way of testing people's consistency to see how trustworthy they are of my how worthy they are of my trust, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's entirely fair.
Okay.
And I would agree with you that is probably a good way of analyzing whether I 100% agree with you. That's a good way of analyzing whether you should trust someone.
Okay. But it felt like every time I would say that, you would say, "Well, I don't think that's very good logic," or "Oh, I don't think that's a very good way to do this," or "Oh, I don't think it's well, okay, I can understand how you might not see it's a very good way to do things, and I can respect that." But when when it feels like I'm being outhandedly dismissed, to me, it feels like being dismissed about the way I go about things. Right?
No, I 100% respect, as I said earlier, you are, absolutely allowed to make whatever decision you want based on whatever reason that you want. I'm not going to, say that you must adopt whatever system that I hold in order to be perfect, right?
But
I don't think that's how it should happen.
Okay, but what it feels like when you're saying, I want to be a part of this movement is saying, I have to put up with these degrees that I disagree with because it's going to have a means to an end. When I would rather push back on the things that I see as disgusting behavior, right? And still be able to accept the ideas outright, right? Maybe that's the difference is I don't have such a tetheredness to a single person when it comes to this idea.
I'd probably agree. I don't have I'm not attached to the reason I'm a leftist is not because of Hassan. And it is probably no, I wouldn't say that. But the reason I'm a leftist is not because of Hassan. And I'm not trying to dismiss any of your reasoning. And I guess
and that's the thing. I don't think you're actively trying. It feels that way, right? And maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm a little cranky, who knows, right? And maybe I'll introspect on it later. I'll listen back to it if I have time. Maybe I'll listen to it again tomorrow. And
yeah, that's fine. Where I see this is a little bit weird is I think to a certain degree, I'm going to be honest, in order to fight online about positions, you kind of have to be a little bit arrogant. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, to a certain degree, I will say that there is an arrogance to the fact that I would get in here and I would argue this in the first place, right? Though I think that, and I think this might explain why we're coming from these things, and I'm gonna say that you are absolutely right to make any decision that you want based on the criteria that you choose to evaluate them by. I just think that we evaluate perhaps on different criteria, and we could have a conversation about whether it is more valuable to evaluate on one criteria as opposed to the other, but that's not a conversation that we have to have.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair.
All right.
All right, my brain hurts, so.
I will let you go.
Okay, sounds good. Whenever you're talking again, you jump in again, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I love you. Have a great night, okay?
All right. Catch you later.
Okay, bye. Oh my god, my brain. Oh, my fucking brain. Oh, I pulled out all the fucking stops on that one. Oh, how we doing, chat? I am tired. It was a good combo. It was. I don't know if we'll ever agree, but yeah, it was a good combo. Oh, I just finished kicking my meat for the last time. Decompress. What Twitter mentions do we got here? Let's see. Oh. What do you think? How do we think we did it? How do we think I did chat, huh? Did I do okay? Did I do garbage? Could I be a better advocate? Okay, so it wasn't just me. Should make this one into a YouTube video. We need people to review this one. I feel like this was a good one. Yeah, that's right. It's the end of the convo time. I'm supposed to talk shit. Goddamn right. It did feel it. Okay, here's the thing, and it's just start some drama. Haha, you want some drama, Sans? Let's get some. Okay. Oh, I burned my meat again. God damn it. Trust is like a big thing to me, and I want to be able to trust that what people are saying to me, I'll believe, right? You know. Especially when they say they're going to do something or we ought to do it. I feel like you need to trust those. I think you need to trust those people that what they're telling you is legit and that they're actually going to follow through and that it's actually something worth doing and worth listening to. Man, look at these little shutters. Wait, are those fucking... Well, hell now, partner. If you enjoyed that content, why don't you hit that like and subscribe? And don't forget to follow on Twitter.